I am your host, Devin Shea. I get the pleasure of being joined here in person this afternoon by Dr. Kyle Gullings. Now, he's the associate professor over at UT Tyler, which is a fun fact about you in and of itself. However, I am so intrigued about what is coming up because we have been able to kind of cross two very interesting pastimes for people that don't necessarily come together for pastimes to be entertained, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I'm not from Texas originally,
really?
but I'm from South Dakota originally, and one of the things that I've come to learn since moving here in 2011 is a couple of things are much bigger in Texas. One is marching band. Marching band does not look like it did when I grew up in South Dakota. It's bigger, it's louder, and on top of that, of course, high school football. It's not just football, it is high school football. It's its own thing. So exactly, we've got this project going on with the East Texas Symphony Orchestra. My piece that I've written, as I'm a composer, is called Gridiron Symphony, and it is a way to kind of bring those worlds together, but really the main focus is it's a work that is meant to honor and to celebrate the strong East Texas high school football culture that we have here in East Texas.
First of all, phenomenal. I'm a huge football fan, high school football, obviously. I'm born and raised Texan, and so I was part of, one of those small towns that boarded everything up on Friday nights because we were all going to the game.
Yes.
We were filling every seat in the stadium. We were cheering on our home team, right? And so can you talk a little bit about, one, we can see that inspiration because you came in and we're like, wow, that's so interesting. But two, where you dove in deep, someone that is not fully immersed, like born and raised in this culture, moving here, seeing it from the outside looking in. So how do you get the confidence, and I'm so excited to hear it, to break in and write about East Texas high school football?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I have to start with kind of the genesis of the idea. I can't take credit for that. That was actually the music director, the conductor of the East Texas Symphony Orchestra, Richard Lee. It was his idea. He gave me a phone call because we knew each other and said, "Hey, Kyle, I've got this idea. Don't hang up," and he went on to have a lengthy conversation about he's also not from Texas originally. He's from Canada, and he said it's just something I don't fully get about this place is just with all good intentions how nuts people are in this area, especially for high school football. And he was trying to wrap his mind around that, and he thought, what better way to do that than to embark on a creative project that explores that from a narrative perspective, which I thought was such a cool and kind of out-of-the-box idea for a symphony. You think about symphony orchestras, and they're like, we'll just play some Mozart, we'll play some Tchaikovsky. Well, they'll still play that. But what else can we do to kind of tackle these sort of topical interests? And so it was really his idea. He wanted to explore that topic, and thought the best way to do that would be to commission a piece, which is to ask a composer, will you write a custom piece for us that's never been played before? And so that's what I did. So it was all credit to Richard for that idea.
And Richard is a friend of the show. He's been on a couple times talking about different things. In fact, he actually previewed way ahead before this was a full-fledged piece. He did tell us a little bit, gave us a little tease about the Gridiron Symphony. So tell us, when you got that phone call, right? He's saying, don't hang up. You're saying like what you heard on the phone call, but what did you feel? What was your initial response?
I'll be really honest, at very first I thought kind of terrified because I am a composer, I've gone to school for a long time in composing, but orchestra composing a symphony, is not really the main place I do my work, right? I mostly write vocal music and small chamber music, but the other side of my output has been opera and musical theater. And I did not write an opera about East Texas high school football, but it's a little bit like that in that it tells a story, it has a narrator, and so I was originally a little bit scared about the idea about writing a symphony. The piece ended up being 26 minutes long, and so it was quite an undertaking to write. But as Richard was talking with me that initial conversation, he said, I really thought about you because you have this musical theater background, and what better way to kind of tell this story than to have a narrative and someone who's used to telling stories through music, which is exactly where I live as a composer. And so it's been a really interesting challenge. Maybe I am a symphony composer now because I've got this long one. So yeah, that's kind of my initial reaction.
Yeah.
Let me tell you a little bit about
go for it.
my first steps after that. I thought, okay, great, make up the story about high school football. I didn't know a single player, a single coach. Really, the only thing, perspective I had on high school football in East Texas was going to see some of the, because I'm in the music program, and so I want to, at UT Tyler, and so I want to go watch what our feeder high schools do, right? I want to go see their musicians in action, and part of that is show up to the game on Friday and watch them play and watch them march, right? That's a big part for us musicians, right? Where they intersect. And so I've been to a handful of games, but never in that same respect. So I really looked at this kind of as like a documentary in a sense. I'm not a filmmaker by any means, but how could you possibly make a documentary about East Texas high school football unless you go there and see it happening multiple times and get to interview and talk with some of the people kind of in this culture and in this in this arena. So that was really kind of that was my first project. And so before I wrote anything, I spent months just attending games, talking to anyone who would listen, sitting down for interviews, and yeah. So that was, I can say more about that in a bit, but that was my way into it. I didn't write any music for the first probably 6 or 7 months that I was working on this project.
And that makes sense. We hear about famous actors. We hear about people like Heath Ledger and the Joker, and like all of these people that are quote unquote method actors do a similar project, right? And so they, before they ever look at a line, before they ever memorize anything, before they really even dive into who this character is, they go and interview who, what's going on here. They go and submerge themselves in the culture. If it's a UFC movie, or if it's a horseback riding movie and they're going to be a cowboy, what have you. So it makes sense. It's in the same similar vein, especially as an artist of sorts, as a creative project, that you want to be immersed in what you're talking about before you can confidently then pull on your strengths and where you lie in your creative journey to be able to do it justice. Okay, so you said, for how many weeks did you say you didn't write anything?
Oh, months.
Oh, months.
Several months.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, this project has been a long time coming.
Apparently. So how long was it from the first phone call that Richard called you to its completion?
I actually don't remember.
Wow.
I don't remember exactly. It's been well over a year that I've been working on this. The very initial discussion was maybe having it premiered last year. Okay. And that's how long I've spent into it. Because we had my interview time, or my documentary time, if you will, had to be during the fall, right? It had to be seeing the football happen. And I know there's spring football and there's all that, but, had to see like the big show. And I felt like I really needed to get that under my belt before I could even start the writing. And the writing itself has taken really in earnest since about April. So, so about 8 or 9 months to write it, and then a couple of months to prepare all the parts and get them looking pretty and all that. So.
Okay, so then how many parts are there of the actual piece?
Well, it depends on what you mean by parts. There are 4 sections, unless you mean like parts like violin, viola, etc. It's a full orchestra, right?
Course.
So there's 27 separate, like I hand the French horn player number 2 their part, and horn player number 1, right? There's 27 separate parts, but in terms of sections that you'll hear in the piece, there's 4 movements, which is a traditional symphony is in 4 movements, going all the way back, into classical styles.
Much like 4 quarters.
But exactly, and that's what it even says so on the score. The first quarter, and then it has like subtitles about what each one is.
Oh man, that's so cool. So there's like little Easter eggs within the project, all alluding back to the football nature of it all.
And I'll say, I mentioned earlier that there's a narrator, right? And I'll talk more about our narrator, I think, in a bit. But that narrator tells the story pretty much throughout. Only rests for maybe 2, 3, 4 minutes at a time in the whole 26-minute span, and is really telling the story throughout the time. And so it's a little bit, again, more like a documentary, or more like a musical almost, but without singers. And so it's a lot more than just music inspired by sport, it is very literally like telling the story of a fictional pair of teams from Texas that are playing in it's the state semifinal game, right? It's the game to go, and so for the first movement, you hear, you get introduced to both of the teams, you hear both of their fight songs, and that's what I'm holding in my hands here.
Cool.
I'll get to this in a bit. This is just a small selection of the
wow.
score, but you get to hear the away team's fight song, and then the home team's fight song, and they play for a little bit. The second movement is called, what did I title it? Something like "There's a Lot to Love About It." It's a love ballad. It's the slow movement, and it's really an honor of the emotions and the feelings that people have toward this game, and especially the nostalgia and the reminiscence that I picked up on when I interviewed some of the former players. If you're from East Texas, you might know about the '94 Tyler Lions.
Of course.
Right? I didn't know that story before I started this. That's why I had to talk to people. But I got to actually talk with some of the people who were in that game about what it meant, not just that game, but the experience of growing up through high school football. And it's really a deep thing, right? It's something that many years down the road, people are still, they can tell you about specific plays and what happened specifically, whether they were players or in the audience. And so I really wanted to capture kind of that love of the game, in a sense. The third movement is a little bit tongue-in-cheek. It's called a scherzo. Usually in a symphony, the third movement is a dance. And so this is a scherzo, which means joke. And the joke is kind of the home team needs to turn it around to come back after being down. And they do... The coach pulls out some trick plays, right? Pulls out some extra plays, and so it's looking at the playbook and the kind of the choreography of who goes where when in the plays as kind of a ballet of choreography. So it's kind of a ballet. There's no dancers this time, but that's the third movement, and then the fourth movement, of course, is the big finale.
Wow.
So.
That's incredible. Yeah, I mean, just listening to the breakdown of it, I can see how it all works. Thinking at first, East Texas football, symphony orchestra, I'm not sure how this is going to coincide with each other, but then as you start thinking specifically the plays and being able to see the movements of you hook around here and then you go here, and I have a dancing background, and so I can see how that plays into dance movements and a rond de jambe here as you hook it. Yeah, I totally I get it. I'm so excited to see this. So for the people that are sitting in the audience, right? The people that are experiencing this, what do you hope they take away?
Well, I'd first start by saying, I don't think we necessarily have as divided of an audience as we initially thought in this project, right? Because there's some folks who've been to lots of football games and never been to the symphony, and some folks who've been to the symphony every time and don't go to the high school football games. But I think there's more overlap than people know.
Okay.
And so I'm not really treating it as two different audiences. I think it's just all one audience, and hopefully everyone will come out and enjoy it. What I want them to get out of it is a fun time, hopefully some memorable tunes they can sing on the drive home, and this sense that in some way, hopefully, that not I, but we as a group, the symphony, have in some way captured and honored, like I said, the good feelings, the positive feelings of what's so great about that sport, and how it's not just about throwing a football, right? It's about bringing 10,000 people into one place at the same time, right, to share an experience. So I think, you mentioned you have a dance background, and so I've got a bit of a theater background as well. That's how I got into music, and I think it's similar to theater, in that it's an event. It's a place that we've made where we're going to go do a thing together, and so in that sense, it's a lot like going to a symphony concert in the first place. So I hope that people will leave seeing that these worlds are a little closer together than maybe they thought originally. Yeah,
that Venn diagram has more intersecting than it does separately. Man, that's so interesting. I also take from it, there's high schoolers, right, that maybe see symphony orchestra as so far removed from their lives. You think of all of the, classical composers, and you think, as a high schooler, as a middle schooler, you think, that's a little schooly, that's a little educationally for me. But then when you start thinking it and start applying it to things that they're excited to go to on a Friday night to hang out with their friends, right? So is there a little bit of you that thinks maybe a symphony orchestra like this about football might bring in a younger crowd as well?
Yeah, I hope so. I hope so, and I think that might have been part of, I don't want to speak for him, but part of Richard's or Robin, the executive director of ETSO, might have been part of their ideas about why this is a good project to embark on in the first place, is to expand the audience both in terms of age, like you said, kind of recruiting a new generation of people who found out they love the symphony and maybe they should be back next time, as well as just folks in general who hadn't attended a symphony concert before, or not very many, and have in their mind, the idea that it's a certain type of music for a certain type of folks or a certain, point, right? It's not always like that, and I think that's really important. That I really applaud Richard and the board of the ETSO for approving this project, because it's so important. We tend to think of classical music as something that happens in a museum almost, right? It's something that happened in the 18th century, give or take, 19th century, and that we get to be transported back to this refined time where we all sit in a room and have different strange looking collars, and that's where some of that music comes from, but it has never stopped being written, right? And so I'm just kind of carrying on that tradition, and as I've heard it say sometimes, all music was once new at some point, and so this is not like some break from what Mozart was doing. It's just kind of my take on it, if you will. So, hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so interesting to hear. Now, what do you hope is the legacy for this symphony? As your name is forever tied to this piece, what do you hope, say 10, 20, 30 years from now, people go back, they look at it, and they say what?
Boy, that was fun. I'd really love if people leave that concert thinking that was a lot of fun. And, if we enjoy it enough, maybe it would be worth trying to put on again sometime, whether that's by ETSO or some other symphony, presumably in Texas. I'm not sure if any Oklahoma symphonies are going to be eager to program a piece about East Texas high school football, but I won't speak for them either. So, it's really about, and so many, as I enter maybe the middle of my career, if I can say, so many of the projects that I choose to work on nowadays are bespoke, right? They're written for not just a particular ensemble or musician to play, but with a particular audience in mind, with a particular theme or topic. Again, coming back to my musical theater and opera background, I tell stories, and what's the point of telling a generic story to a generic audience, right? So, so I hope to some degree that legacy, whether it just gets played this once or it gets picked up and played by orchestras around the world, that'd be something, wouldn't it? That it serves as some kind of, historical artifact, if you will, documenting just how much people love the sport and what it means to people in this area, and hopefully is a good reflection of that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I've always said that football is so metaphorical. It is like such a piece of life playing out.
Yeah.
And the excitements of it and how we're all unifying together. I can totally see how it translates into a symphony orchestra. Now, you mentioned the narrator and that you want to dive a little deep into that. So tell us a little bit. Do you have him or her cast?
I do. Yeah. Your listeners might know, or your viewers might know this name. It's Bill Coates. Okay. If any of you know sports media or have listened to, I think it's 92.1 on a Friday night in autumn, you've probably heard his voice. Bill is one of the first people I spoke to at the beginning of this project, and he has been so helpful in telling me, getting me up to speed on the history and again what this kind of means. And he was just so good at that and so versed. Sorry, let me back up. So he's the sports director the sports director at KLTV. KLTV, is that right? Yeah,
so.
92.1.
92.1.
And he is the person who does the live in-game broadcast over the radio for both of the local teams here. And so again, if you've been driving around in your car on a Friday night, you've probably heard him give that play-by-play. But he's also just such a fun guy and you know, really fun to talk to. And so he was a little bit my guide in this, and I thought, you know, I think he needs to be the narrator, and so he agreed to. I hope he won't mind me sharing that. So Bill is, he won't mind. He's talking about it too. So he's going to be our narrator, and he's doing such a fantastic job of it. Yeah, and I'm just so honored that he's been willing to work with us on it.
Yeah, it sounds like you're in fantastic hands when it comes to almost like calling a game, or you know, like an announcer over there.
Absolutely.
Really puts you in the mindset of it. Awesome.
And it's not just he has the voice,
right,
but it's not just the voice. He's got the cadence. He knows the terminology, right? So I wrote up a script for him, and we've been practicing it. And he just a little bit, like, I wouldn't say improvises, but you know, kind of puts his own spin on it, and it sounds so much better than the words that I wrote on the page or my mock-up demo when I make the recording, because I am not the football person, and I don't have, you know.
Hey, you can't say that now. You've been to at least 5 games.
Oh, I've been to more than that.
There
yeah, but you know, I'm not. I don't have the news background, the reporting background that he has.
He has the voice. Everything is like.
But also just the knowledge, right?
Yeah.
He has the knowledge. It's not just it's about knowing what to say and how to say it. And
Well, it sounds like you're more than happy with your narrator get.
Oh yeah. Bill's gonna do great. We're excited.
So can you tell us? I know it is kind of your baby, and I'm sure you love it all the same. Can you tell us one or two of your favorite parts of the symphony without giving anything away too much?
Yeah. So I should talk about what I've got in my hand here.
Yeah, let's do it.
And I should talk about. Yeah, I mean, I should probably come back to what I already described, the second movement, kind of the love theme, the ballad. You know, that was the very first note of the symphony that I wrote. I wasn't at a piano or anything. I wasn't even working. It just came to me as I was thinking about this project and the good feelings that this sport engenders in some of the folks I've been interviewing. I thought, well, what does that sound like? And a melody came to me. That's kind of I don't know, artistic way of talking about inspiration. That's normally not how I work. Normally I sit down at the piano and I write the thing I'm supposed to write that day, right? I'm very kind of methodical as a composer. This one just came to me, and so it's this lovely, at first I think it's an oboe solo near the beginning of the second movement. That's just, if you just love a lyrical ballad, that's your thing. Maybe it's a little bit sappy, but so that's probably my favorite part. And my other favorite part is how I've tried to take kind of the classical symphony idea and vehicle, but also interweave these, you know, like I mentioned, the fight songs of the two different schools. So at first they play like separately. We just get a little preview as we're introducing the teams, and then each team eventually, spoiler, each team eventually scores at some point. And so we get to hear the full fight song from each of them. There's a school hymn, school song that the home team plays. That's just a brass feature. Well, it's not raucous, right? It's more solemn, and so this is what this happens at halftime when they're behind and they need some inspiration, right? So they go through the words of the school song, and so that's a brass feature. That one's fun. And I'll point out, I don't think it's giving away too much, those parts where the stuff the marching band or the stand band would normally play during the show, those are actually played not by the symphony, or at least most of them are played not by the symphony, but actually by some of our local high school marching band students from both of the local public high schools here. So the programs, the marching programs, or the band programs, I should say, at Tyler High School and Legacy are donating some of their students to play, and that's what I'm holding actually. This is just 12 pages of it, but it's a few minutes of it. The full score is about 100 pages long.
Oh wow!
But this is just a dozen or so pages that show the excerpts where they play. So they play a little bit in the first movement, and then they play a bunch more in the last movement. They kind of bring it all home at the end.
Wow. So two different high school marching bands, more or less, are now actually involved in. Man, that's so cool.
And
I feel so united.
I would love to have all of both of the marching bands here, but the Cowan Center just doesn't fit that many on top of an entire symphony already being there. So we'll have. So I don't want you to think that that's their entire band. They're actually much larger than what you'll see here. But we're lucky to have some participation there, and a big thank you, of course, to Tyler ISD for lending us some of their expertise, and to the band directors of both of those programs for lending us some of their kids during a busy spring season. So thank you to Larry and to Sam for that. So we're really excited about getting them involved, and I think it'll be a fun opportunity for them to get to be as part of a performance with a professional symphony orchestra. Like what high school student can say they got to do that? Not very many. So.
Not only just like a resume builder, but also just to get that hands-on experience and be able to be a part of something that you can relate to, because you've been on the field on those Friday nights, so you know what you're playing intimately. That's so exciting. Okay, so before we wrap up here, I want to you to look in that camera and tell us if there's just a sentence or a few words, what have you, that gets people in those seats. What would you tell them this is about?
Yeah, I mean, this is a project that brings together an important part of East Texas culture, and that is a love for high school football. People in this area are crazy for it, and that's a great thing. And so this symphony is really meant to honor that and to help tell that story. If you are a fan of football, come to the concert. If you are a fan of the symphony, come to the concert. If you're a fan of new music and experimental music, come to the concert. This is the first time it's ever been played, ever, and so it'll be a lot of fun. And I hope people can make it out. I can give some details about how to. That's what I was about to say.
If we want to, right? I know I do. I'm sure a ton of you guys that are watching here also intrigued as well. Where is it? When is it, and how can we get tickets?
Sure, it's coming up pretty soon here on March 23rd. That's a Saturday at 7:30 p.m. at UT Tyler's Cowan Center. That's where the performance is going to be. And you can get tickets by going to the Cowan Center box office, finding their website, or by going directly to etso.org and clicking Buy Tickets.
Fantastic. All right, before we go, is there anything that we have not covered that you want to make sure people of East Texas now know about the Gridiron Symphony?
Man, no, I feel like you've done a great job of asking questions, and I feel like that's just about everything I can think of to say, other than it's just really been an honor, first of all, to be asked to write this, and then, to have the opportunity to have so many excellent professional and amateur musicians working on this project. And so I just want to say a big thank you, of course, to Richard, whose idea it was, to Robin Hampton, the executive director, who helped shepherd that, and to everyone who's been involved in the project. It's been a lot of fun, and I hope people have half as much fun in attending it as I've had writing the project.
Fantastic. Dr. Kyle Gullings, Associate Professor Associate Professor of Music at UT Tyler, also the composer of the Gridiron Symphony.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Oh, and really quick, it's not the entire concert. It's only the last 26 minutes. There's a whole nother almost 45 minutes of music before this that's not my music, so you're gonna have a whole evening of entertainment that ends with this. So
that's so exciting.
It'll be a lot of fun.
Dr. Kyle, thanks again for joining us here on East Texas Now, and I can't wait to hear more of your music.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. From there we